Yeah, let's do it.
All right.
All right. Hi everyone, and welcome to another episode of Product Drama Podcast. This is Kate.
And this is Anatoly. For many years, Basecamp has been a standout example of how much you can achieve with a small team. They have also built a top project management tool and have always shipped new upgrades and features. And now we can learn how they do it.
Well, I don't know. For me, reading Basecamp books was a tricky part because when I read it, I feel very excited. Like, yeah, those guys nailed it. I feel the same. I want to do it in our team. And the next day, when you go to yet another meeting, you have like a chit chat with the colleague and say, you know what? They say having too much meetings is very ineffective. So for me, it has never made it beyond the book.
Well, I must disagree, and today our guests will prove vice versa because they apply Shape Up methodology by Basecamp in their company, and I must say they do it successfully. So let's meet Vi and Canaan from Careerplug. Hi, guys.
Hi.
Hello.
Hi.
How are you?
Doing great. How about y'all?
Good.
Just please introduce yourself and tell us more about your product and your role in the company.
My name's Canaan. I'm the engineering manager here at Careerplug. I've been with the company for almost 4 years now. Just a few days, it'll be 4 years. We make applicant tracking system and people operating systems. So we help small businesses make the right hires. That's our kind of mission. And V, you might add something to that.
Yeah, my name is Vi. I lead user experience design and design as a whole at Careerplug. What Canaan said is accurate to Careerplug, and I must add that we focus on small and medium businesses, people who generally do not know what goes into hiring, so we help them learn the ropes of it, including all the legalities that go into hiring people. So that's what we do at Careerplug.
Good, thank you. So guys, as far as I know, you don't have product managers in your company. So how come, why you don't have them, and how do you manage all this stuff and make sure that you are building the right product?
I know most of the times I say this out loud that we don't have product managers. Everybody's jaws just drop. Like, how do you work? So Canaan, I know you've got like good things to start us off on that front.
Sure, yeah. Well, we've taken a more maybe like a distributed approach to project managers. We have leaned really heavily on something called Shape Up that Basecamp introduced, and it's a little bit of a different way to work and build software. Essentially, our kind of approach to the problem is opening it up to the company. So our history was for a long time, it was a little bit like the Wild West. You hear that quite often, right? Where we're just doing work in unscheduled blocks, however long it takes to get a thing done. We started to be a little bit more prescriptive with sprints. We thought, hey, maybe Agile will work really well for us. So we went out, we hired a really experienced product manager who had worked in Agile, who could bring some of that insight to our company and help us implement it. And what we found, for one reason or another, is it just wasn't working for our organization. I'm sure there's something to be said around, were we doing it exactly right? There probably could have been things that we were doing better in that process, but we kind of got to a point we said, okay, this isn't working. You know, here's some of the pain points. What can we look to help us alleviate some of that? And that was around the time that Shape Up was kind of coming out, and we thought there were some really interesting ideas in there and thought that they might work well for our company. So we started to explore that, and it's been really great. You know, we've opened up the process. Anybody can participate in creating work for the project. It gives our engineers and design team a little bit more autonomy to be involved in decision making. So it's been an interesting experiment thus far.
Yeah, I must say, when we did have Agile and we were practicing it, none of us felt that it was our natural inclinations. We feel better when we're working together as closely as possible, which Shape Up allows for. With Agile, we were, and just having a product manager in place, we felt that we had this one person that had to manage every part of the work that we were doing and how it was being done and who it was being communicated with. which kind of muddied the waters for us. So we like this idea of working very, very closely together, especially the designers and the developers. Yeah.
But getting back to Kate's question, how do you guys make sure you're building the right stuff? Who picks what to build?
Yeah, that's a
That's a
good question.
two-part thing right now where the onus of identifying pain points and what percentage of our users are experiencing that lies within the various company members. So once they do that part and get the research done, including identifying the user base it affects, the kind of money we could possibly lose or gain, all that good stuff, they write it down in a formal document called a pitch, which is then passed on to leadership team, the C-level, the upper leadership, where they take the final call on what is best for business and take a pick of all the pitches that they have and pass it on to the product team to work on. So that is how ideas are vetted and identified.
And what does the pitch look like?
Yeah. So a pitch is, in general, it encapsulates a problem statement, a proposed solution, an appetite, which is how long do we want to spend working on this, and kind of like some boundaries set. So like where we're not going to go. I think one of the real interesting things with Shape Up is they really push you to change a little bit of the mental model about how you're approaching work. So instead of saying, hey, we want to implement X, how long will that take? We kind of switch that statement around to say, here's the problem that the business is facing. How much time are we willing to spend solving that problem, right? So that's your value, right? If something is affecting a small subset of users, you might assign a smaller value to it. But if something's really big, project really important, we might say, we work in 6-week cycles. So we might say, hey, this is a full 6-week project and we're going to have 2 engineers on it, and a designer is going to be involved. And really what that time box does is it makes you really focus and make sure you're being lean and targeted with the things that you're picking, right? So as an engineer, you can always, I could probably make this implementation a little bit better, a little cleaner. You can never really stop with that, so you can keep going. So that's a big part of the pitch, is having that appetite set, again, with problem, solution, proposed solution, and that's a tricky one where you don't want the solution in the pitch to be so prescriptive that by the time it gets to the designer and the developers on the ground, that they have no wiggle room to work, right? So you're trying to find this happy medium where you can say, hey, here's generally what we want to do with some good boundaries. Now y'all figure out how to actually implement it. That's kind of a high level summary of a pitch.
But from what you just told, it looks like the pitch is actually a multi-page document, which brings me to my next point. If C-level people are gathering together to pick which pitch is the winner, or there may be multiple, are they just sitting in a room for a couple of days, just reading and debating about those pitches, which is better?
I think the way we're handling it right now is the pitch process is very open and transparent as they're being worked on. So there's a bit of a collaborative effort as the pitches are being created. So we don't ever really get to a point where, okay, we need to pick pitches for the next cycle, but no one's seen what they are. Now we need to sit down and read them all and kind of debate. Like there's a lot of communication between pitch writers, and they might come to me or somebody on my team and say, hey, what about this technically, frightens you? Or is there anything we're not thinking of? And they might come to Vi and say something similar in her realm, like, hey, this is kind of a solution that we're thinking about. Does this make sense? What do we need to do to vet this? So the process of actually creating the pitch is a very collaborative effort for us at the moment. And so when we get to time about going to the betting table and selecting pitches, there's usually a pretty good pulse across the organization, or at least the people involved in the process, about it's feeling like this group is going to kind of be the winner. Let's see what comes in. And then, you're also picking, you can't have several pitches that all have like the maximum appetite, right? So then there's that balancing act where you got to examine, say, okay, well, we like these are important. What resources do we have available? Who's got time off right now, things like that. So that's kind of how that is all working at the moment. And of course, fine tuning and tweaking as we go, always.
So when it comes to picking, people already know which are better and which are maybe for the next time.
Kinda.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's still that, at the table, that's where, like, the betting table is where we kind of, like, decide on these, and there's still that factor of, we don't know exactly, but I think you do get a good pulse about, okay, starting to see, the closer you get to the next cycle, you're starting to see, okay, we kind of understand tentatively what resources we're going to have available. We feel really confident that these pitches are ready, maybe these pitches aren't. So there is some sense, but I don't think you ever go into it knowing exactly everything that's going to come out of it, because really that comes down to, we've got all these great ideas, any number of them could be implemented and they would provide some value to the business, but what's going to be the most impactful thing that we can do right now in this next cycle that's going to continue to set us up for success, throughout the rest of the year and forward.
I should add a little bit of color to what Canaan just said, which is, gauging the impact of the things that are getting picked up. A part of why the betting table is effective is because they hold reps from each of the teams in the company. So sales is a good idea of like, what is it that people are gravitating towards? Customer experience leaders know what is it that the flavor of the problem is for this season, for example. And then the president obviously knows which is the money aspect of it, right? So when these three sit down together, they're making a pretty holistic, well-informed decision. The other things that play a part in their picking process is that they keep a pulse on the trends within the help cases that are coming in over like the previous 8 weeks that are going to lead up to this next cycle. They keep a tab on the kind of bugs that we're getting in and like what is it that's getting affected and how much has it bothered the users and the clients. So things like that help inform the kind of pitches that get picked, and eventually I think they almost always have some sort of a theme attached, whether it's like a part of the app or a certain type of job that's to be completed by the users, what have you not, and all of these somehow come together and relate to all the pitches that are picked during a cycle.
Yeah. I just asking because I do remember during agile sprints there is like a day when you plan for the next iteration, and it's usually like a day of pain because you are sitting in a room with tons of people doing meetings, and it's like so boring.
So interesting thing to add to that, we don't keep a proper backlog, right? There's no concept of grooming a backlog, and so that again, that's that nimbleness that this allows us to say, hey, like maybe we had 10 great pitches for this cycle. I'm just throwing numbers out. Say we selected 5. That's what it kind of worked out to. The 5 that didn't get selected, they don't automatically guaranteed like, well, the next cycle we're going to review them, right? Like the owner of that pitch needs to either maybe there's some things they need to alter. Maybe it didn't get selected because it was decided like, hey, this actually isn't ready enough to go to the table, or maybe it just wasn't the priority at the time, and those kind of then get distributed to the individual owners who were putting them in and offering them as a solution. And when the next cycle rolls around, if they still think there's a great business case and the thing's ready, they bring it back. But that allows us to not kind of like lock ourselves in to this concept of like, well, we said we wanted to do this, we haven't gotten to it for 6 months, but we're just going to do it now anyways. Like maybe 6 months from now, that thing we were potentially talking about means nothing to us, right? Like it allows us to kind of change frequently.
And you mentioned there is a pitch writer. So if I've got an idea, I have to go to that person to help me out to write my pitch, or I should pass my idea to that person and she will do it?
If you have the idea, you're the writer, technically.
Possibly, like the way we're managing it is like we do have an aha board, right? And so we've kind of put it this way to everybody in the company, right? Like if you want to write a formal pitch and bring it all the way through the process, everybody is empowered to do that. And you can reach out to any number of individuals across the company for help in doing that. The reality is though, right, that like most team members aren't going to necessarily have the bandwidth or the experience to get something like all the way across the finish line. So what we've implemented is an aha board where, like, say yourself, oh, I have this great idea. I don't really know how to come up with a good solution, but I know I'm talking to customers. I know this is a problem that needs to be addressed. The aha board is a place that you can go put that idea, give a little data backing it up, and then those in the company who have a little bit more bandwidth and who are doing more of the pitch writing in normal cases, they can look to the aha board for inspiration at times. And we're always evaluating that board. Every cycle we go through and we provide some sort of response to every idea that was submitted internally, whether, hey, we're moving this forward, we need a little bit more. So that's kind of how we're managing those dual tracks.
And let's talk about technical debt. How does it managed within the process? Because this is like a tricky part. You normally may face developer who says like, hey, we need to refactor this because I'm in pain. Guys, I don't want to work with this anymore.
Totally. The technical debt is okay. So there's two ways we kind of manage it. We as a team take a kind of slow, incremental, methodical approach to refactoring. Like for instance, our code base is quite old. It's been around since like Rails 2 or 3 was when it was initially created, and we're on Rails 6 now. It's been around 8-9 years. And so there have been patterns in there that are out of style for, whether it's a hip thing to do or not. But so we're constantly evaluating, how are we writing this? How do we work together collectively? And so like at the moment, we've got some newer ways and new approaches that we're doing things, but we're not saying, okay, we need to go through the entire code base. So one way we handle that is, hey, as we're working through in these cycles, if you have an opportunity that makes sense with the time frame you have, like update to the newer patterns, right? Like slowly kind of churn through it that way. And then ShapeUp also offers us something called a cool down period. So we have 6 weeks on, cycle work, everything's assigned, 2 weeks off. That 2 weeks off are an opportunity for developers to work on passion projects, work on additional bugs that have come up if we're backed up, and technical debt is in there, right? Like we have an opportunity for somebody to come and say, hey, this is a really nasty part of the app. I'm going to spend 2 weeks going through this and refactoring it and proposing that to the team. And that's kind of the time period we get to do it. Obviously, sometimes that's not sufficient amount of time and it's not always perfect, but we can always get technical pitches in the cycle, right? Like if we recognize like, hey, this is a really big problem and it's slowing us down, all these ambitions that we want to do as a company are kind of being hindered by this, we can write up a pitch, take that to the betting table, and actually get some proper time as well.
And speaking about bugs, so there are only 2 weeks to fix them. I mean, bugs from previous. What happens if like support team comes to you and say, hey, can you guys fix a bug for me because I have a client and she's really nervous about this?
The way Basecamp does it, I believe, just by like kind of reading their book and some other things, like they do in general wait till that 2 weeks to fix bugs. We have been taking an approach of during the cycle work, always having an individual developer on bug assignment, right? To have some ability to as things come in. Christina, our head of QA, she has a great prioritization schema that she's worked up with the rest of the company. So as bugs come in and they're vetted, we're prioritizing them. We've got SLAs set with the company internal, like with this priority, this is how long you should expect for something to be addressed. But yeah, we are actually carrying that through the cycle. So it's not just that 2 weeks when we do it. That 2 weeks though, there's usually a little bit more bandwidth for the team, since there's no more cycle work to do and people can kind of jump in. But we're at the moment working on those throughout the cycle as well.
So there is a person who is 6 weeks on duty fixing bugs, or it just like 1 week for that person, another for another one?
Exactly. Like it can kind of it'll vary depending on the cycle work. We're still experimenting with how we're running our small batch cycle work. So in ShapeUp, you kind of have conceptually 6-week projects and then small batch cycle works. We're still dialing that in as far as how we're doing, but generally, yeah, you're kind of the second one you said, where you're going to have somebody who's, hey, maybe they're on cycle work for X amount of weeks, and then when they're not, they're on bugs, and that's kind of rotating. Occasionally, I think we've had a cycle where we've had an individual who is basically on bug duty the entire time, but generally we try to get everybody some cycle work. Right, so it feels good to do projects, right? You don't just want to do bugs all the time, but sometimes it's also nice just to do bugs and get a bunch of stuff done too.
I don't know. For me, I was a developer for a couple of years, and for me, it was just the process of fixing bugs was a little depressing. So I always wanted to do some new cool stuff. So that is why I was asking. By the way, how the complexity of the requirement is managed? You say there is like an appetite concept that what if you missed? I mean, developer comes to manager or to the team and says, hey, I got a discovery and we need more time to do that.
Conceptually, when you set the appetite, what you're saying is, we think it's worth to spend 3 weeks fixing this, right? And if we miss, the concept of this thing called a circuit breaker is supposed to kick in, where you miss. We either need to pick it up next cycle or make another plan. We've been a little bit loose with that, in the sense of like we still feel like we're learning how to write good pitches and learning how to set good appetites. So we've allowed, kind of depending, like, hey, if this was maybe a 2-week project and it's going to go over by 2 or 3 days, we've kind of been allowing that to happen. I think we're trying to be in a better spot where we can actually say, hey, we missed, so we need to pick it up next time. But I think that, again, like recognizing that we're probably not super great at writing pitches, or like as good as we can be right now. So maybe we're missing some things. Maybe there were requirements that weren't there. We're allowing ourselves a little bit of flexibility. But if something's going to miss drastically, like we have cut projects where it was like, hey, this is actually a week or 2 off. There was a big thing that got missed. We've dropped it and we said, okay, we need to, how far along do we get with the work? What's remaining? Let's craft a new pitch, and then let's put that forward next time so we can pick it back up.
Another question. You mentioned that you're still learning how to do pitches. Can you name a couple things that are common, in terms of mistakes? What are those things that people do every time and they shouldn't? Just so other listeners who may consider switching to ShapeUp will know how to avoid them.
I think our biggest miss so far has been not front-loading design work before the pitches hit the project teams. And by that I mean is like, design usually takes up research and vetting an idea and what have you not. So while we do not want to be entirely prescriptive with pitches, we do want to give a basic boundary to work within. And that boundary definition is best done by designers, fortunately or unfortunately. Basecamp gets away with not doing this entirely because of the structure of their team, where their designers are basically front-end developers. Our team isn't like that. Our designers are purely designers and not front-end devs. We have like an inkling of how programming works and how front-end shakes out, but it's not what we do primarily. So because of that, we've been landing up with pitches that require a ton of discovery work within the cycle period. So when teams should be focusing on building out a solution and figuring out what is deliverable in a 6-week or a 2-week part, they are suddenly stuck with defining what the solution is altogether instead of paring it down and delivering something. So I think that has been our biggest miss, but we're like slowly pivoting on towards front loading more design work and research work, just so the pitches are better formed. From here, I think our challenge is going to be hitting that correct level of abstraction, where the solution isn't entirely defined, but leaves enough space for the project teams to do a thing with it too and explore. What else do you have to add to that, Canaan?
Yeah, I think that's probably the biggest one. It's just we talked about it a little bit earlier. It's like, what is that sweet spot for your organization? And that is so dependent on the people you have on your team, right? Like, that's a great point about Basecamp. Like, their designers are kind of front-end developers, and we're not that here. So how do we make this work for our organization? And I think the solution we're finding is exactly what Vi said, is like, we need to be a little bit more upstream with some design work, but again, not so much that we don't want to have our teams being ticket takers, right? Where they're just, here's everything you need to do, just go build it, right? We like the collaboration. Our team likes the collaboration. I think one of the more, a little skewed from this question, but just one of the interesting things that I've seen from my team is, like, since we've started doing this, we're talking about now, we're working with support. How can we get developers shadowing support on some cadence once a month or so to have a pulse on what they're doing? And that's that collaboration that we get, right? So we don't want to do so much design work that by the time it gets to the building phase that, oh, there's nothing I need to do. I go in and I build exactly what's here. So finding that sweet spot is tricky, but I'm with you, Vi. It feels like we're moving in a better direction each cycle. We're okay, a little bit better. A few more projects were really successful. Why were they successful? Okay, let's keep doing that. Why were the ones that weren't? Okay, let's stop doing that. And that's how we're continuing to iterate on it.
So you do retrospectives every iteration?
Yep, every 7th week is a retrospective.
If we sum up, guys, maybe you can name some top biggest 3 advantages for your company since you adopted Shape Up methodology.
Do you want 3 each or 3 between the 2 of us?
3 as you wish.
Okay, Canaan, you're first.
I will say the biggest one for me has been communication/collaboration. I think those kind of go hand in hand, but that has been a huge win for us. It feels like the further along we get with this, the more sales, customer success, development, marketing, everybody knows a little bit more what's going on and feels involved in the process. I think that's like the one that stood out to me among the others.
And piggybacking on that, number 2, a consequence of this collaboration and like cross-team work has been just a general appreciation of what all of us do. Most of the times, at least in my past workplaces, I had no idea what sales was doing or what their pain points were or how they went about making a sale. Similarly, for customer support, had no clue what their life was like. And this process has generally allowed designers to appreciate developers to appreciate marketing, and all that good stuff, and pay attention to all the qualitative things that none of us ever see unless we're sitting right next to each other and doing that work together. So that's been pretty great about having this process. And like, finally, from a business point of view, we adjust every 6 weeks. So we can be really current in addressing whatever's wrong for our clients and whatever will get us further with them. Yeah,
that's good. We're productive. We're doing the most impactful things for us, which is really, really important. As you all know, to keeping a business alive and healthy is doing important things.
Okay, book versus real life. How does book differ from the shape up in real life?
Right. Yeah. I mean, and they mentioned this in the book. You know, it's like there's no silver bullet to any problem like in life ever. Like, right? It's like especially with trying to build software, right? Like this is like it takes so much effort and communication and getting people on the same page. So I think more than anything, Shape Up has been a really good inspiration for us. It is like let us think about the tools and the processes and how we approach this differently. I think we've probably mentioned some of the areas where we've skewed a little bit differently than they've outlined it. So, I mean, really more than anything, what got us excited was like, hey, here's a different approach. Here's how they're applying it there. Can we take some of the lessons learned, look at our organization as a whole and say, how can we do some of that? And how can we get the success that they're having? When you read the book, it sounds great and you just want to go implement it, right? Like say, we're going to do exactly this, but that probably wouldn't work really well for anybody unless you're exactly like Basecamp. And then even then it might be difficult.
I think they start the book with "this works for us." So I guess they open it up with that expectation that do something else with it and whatever works for you, figure it out. Yeah.
Do you have any tips for those who want to start with shape up methodology in their company and switch to it? How to start?
Be open-minded, not averse to change, and I think in Shape Up, like they do offer some ways to start, right? You can kind of depending on where you're at as an organization, you can start with cycles, or maybe you start with pitches and incorporate. I think the important thing probably is to not just be like, oh, well, we've been working this way for 3 years, and like today, Wednesday the 3rd, we're going to switch everything over to Shape Up, and that's how we are now, right? It's like examine what you like in Shape Up, identify what makes you a little hesitant, and start to slowly roll out. Like here are the things that we do like. Okay, let's try these. Let's see how this works for us, and just continue to add in. I think that's where you'll be more successful than just switching at once.
I think when we had started, our product org leader, the VP of product and engineering, he actually sat and came up with a good number of pitches before we tried cycle work. And he and the rest of upper management took some time in like getting these shaped and ready for trying it out in the cycle. So that's how we approached it. Instead of just, flipping the switch, we did some of this while still working the way we were at the time, and then transitioned over permanently to Shape Up.
By the way, do you see any disadvantages from this Shape Up? I mean, from what was it like before?
Yeah, maybe some drawbacks, not just positive sides, but maybe there are also some drawbacks or things that you might consider improving.
Yeah, that's a really good one.
I know in the long run, I bet scaling this front-loaded design process is going to be tricky, at least for me so far. Outside of that, the other thing that I think will be interesting and has been a challenge too is just to have people understand how to write pitches and like totally invest completely and mentally into making a case for their idea. I think that is the part that is that definitely has a learning curve attached to it.
Yeah, that's a good point about scalability. Like this probably isn't for the enterprise organization, right? Like this works for us. We're a company that's, how long? Almost 12 years old now. Like our product's been in production for 8 or 9 years, and we're still like just over 50 employees. Like our ambitions over the next 3 years would be around 80 employees. We're not a big organization. So this can kind of still work, right? Like this is an evolution of where we were, but if you've got hundreds of developers and designers, like this probably isn't going to scale up. So I think that's probably the biggest thing I would say is like, you really need a tight-knit team and buy-in, right? Because like our CEO and president are at the betting table, right? They're very intimately involved with everything that everything that's getting built in our software. That's not going to be the case everywhere, right? And not every organization runs that way. And so, yeah, scalability. And also just dialing the pitches, right? Like I think I got some feedback, and we all did early on, where the pitches were so rough that the project teams of engineer and designer, like they felt like they were actually project managers. Like the ideas were too loose, where they had to do so much work in a condensed time period. It was kind of stressful, and that's why, we've been getting better a little bit further back, more dialed and prescriptive, but not too. So, yeah, I think those two, I'd agree.
From what I learned, this shape up process requires team to have this startup atmosphere. Like everyone is trying to do something. But what if, from what I saw in other teams, people are not always proactive. So how do you deal with that? Do you hire only those who are proactive, or this process works for people who are just love to do what they do and what they're told to do?
Yeah, that's a really good point. I think we've got a great culture at Careerplug, right? Like those are the type of individuals we hire, right? It's difficult to be as lean as we are and as successful as we've been, fortunately, and not having individuals who kind of function in that way. So that's a really great point, right? Like we kind of expect most people across the company to be engaged and involved in those types of things. And I think when you hire great people, which is our whole mission, right? Like we want to hire people and empower them to reach their potential, right? Like when you do that as an organization, I think those attributes naturally kind of bubble up. Right, yeah. If you've got a team of engineers and they have no interest and they just want to take tickets and do what's right in front of them, like this probably won't work for you, right? Like you need that.
They should go to enterprise project. Yeah, thank you. That's actually a really inspiring talk, because I really find something that is very useful and could be applied even to non-software projects, and especially the culture part. This is very important, and I think this is the base for the entire change.
Oh, that is 100% true. Yeah.
Thank you, guys.
If any of the viewers, listeners do decide to try ShapeUp, just be kind to yourself. Like, have patience. This is not an easy change. We've been doing this agile waterfall thing for so long that it is tricky for any of us like pivot, as ShapeUp does need. So just be kind to yourself if you do try to do this. Yeah.
Yeah. I'd say, this is a tool, right? It's not going to work for everywhere. It might work really well for certain organizations and not others, but ultimately all of these tools, whether it be agile or waterfall, like the purpose of them is to get out of the way and allow us to do important work so that we as individuals and collectively can be successful. Feel empowered, feel that we are making a dent in whatever that is and what you're building. So I would say view ShapeUp from that lens, that it's a tool that could maybe help you get there, and give it a try, see what you like. And if you have thoughts that why it's not great or what's working, share them, because I think like ultimately like this is, all these things are just collaborative, right? We're all just people working together trying to figure out, hey, how do we actually do this and be successful? Share the ideas. I think that's what's most interesting and exciting for us getting to try this is, we're participating in somewhat of an experiment to see, hey, can we do this a little differently and be successful? And if so, how can we tinker that and share that out to the world?
Good, thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, nice advice. Thank you, guys.
Okay, let's wrap it up. Cool.
Yeah. Thank you. Have a great day ahead.
Yeah, thank you for this inspiring talk. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Hey, it was really nice. I appreciate everything, y'all. So thank you very much.
Thanks for having us. Yeah.